The Writer's Block.
Welcome to the Writer's Block. This edition was recorded June 29th, 2018 at Charlie's American Cafe in Norfolk. It features musical guests Lucky Riggs and Roddy Lane. We'll begin with three pieces: Jacob Crocco, The Years Before, Kristen Lee Pino and Love of a Leaf, and Manoli Koromidis with The Santana. Following that, our first musical selection from Riggs and Lane.
He could feel the sweat on his face as he trekked along the dirt road. He couldn't remember much. What was his name again? It didn't matter, he thought as he walked slowly. Nothing matters much anymore. It was night. He never liked the nighttime. He glanced forward. He could see a pair of dim headlights weaving up the road towards him. As the light grew closer, he tried to recall the events of that last day. He remembered he was in a building, a small house maybe. He felt as if he was really there, even though it was just a memory. It felt so vividly real. All he could remember, though, was a face, a beautiful face. She was screaming something. His name, he thought? He couldn't hear her properly. He caught part of his name, Al, but the sound was too loud. What was that sound? He glanced at the woman's side, where she was clutching a small child, but he couldn't tell whether the child was a boy or a girl. The child was crying and screaming, but that wasn't the noise he was hearing so loudly. Then it occurred to him. The noise were gunshots. The woman's voice suddenly came into contrast. "They're coming," she was screaming. "Who's coming?" he asked, confused. She fell to the floor and lay there a minute or so. When she finally lifted her head up, he could see blood had pooled on the floor and was seeping from her mouth. "Please," she begged. "What is it? What do you want?" he asked, still in a daze. "Please," she said, and her head fell to the floor. Then he remembered her name. It was Clara. It was his wife. He suddenly felt crushingly sad, but he didn't know why. The child looked at him, a frightened look in his eyes, and their eyes met, and they stared at each other for what must have been an eternity. A sudden explosion coming from outside the building broke their concentration on each other. Walking over to a nearby window, he looked outside. They were in a brick building sitting atop a large hill. Tanks and men were rushing up the hill, shooting and screaming. It looked like chaos out there. A loud noise jolted the man from his memory. The truck had stopped in front of him, and the driver had gotten out and closed the door. "Cheerios, love." The stranger had a thick British accent. "What are you doing out here on a night like tonight?" he asked. "I had an accident," Al says. "Need a lift?" says the stranger. "Yes, please," says Al. "All right, hop up in here, bloke. I could take you to the nearest town if that need be the case," the stranger says. The stranger opened his door and got inside. Al follows and steps in. The stranger started his car and then shuts it off again. "You know, love, I never got your name." "Never said it," says Al. "Okay, well, mine's Edward, but most of my friends call me Ed." "I'm Al," says Al. The conversation ends there. Ed is completely focused on the road. Al leaned his head back and is instantly in one of his memories. Al, can you hear me?" It was his wife. Al was in a new place this time. Where, he thought, but he couldn't form a sentence to speak. He glanced around. He was in a tight room. A closet, maybe? It was dimly lit, and from the looks of it, very old. The child from earlier was sitting in the corner, crying, is what it looked like. "Can you hear me?" his wife said. He couldn't talk right. He felt as if there was a rock stuck in his throat. "Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes," she continued. "You've been hurt terribly. Do you remember anything?" "No," he said in a shaky voice. "The tanks, the men, they took the castle." "I remember you," he says. "You died." "What? No, I didn't," she said. But then her voice switched to a British accent. "Hello, love. We're here." He awoke in the stranger's car. Ed was his name? Al didn't care. Al didn't care much about anything right now. He was just sad and confused. He stepped outside the car and glanced around. It looked as though they were in a village. It was a small one. There were maybe 4 shacks and a pub. He thanked the man, Ed, and walked into the pub to get a really big drink. He needed it. When he walked into the bar, the first thing he noticed was the bartender. She was a beautiful woman, maybe 30 years of age. But the thing that surprised him was that he knew this woman. This was Clara, his wife. He walked over to the counter and sat down. "What can I get you?" Clara said. "The strongest thing you've got," he said. "You got any money for that?" Almost as if on instinct, he pulled a pouch of coins from his pocket and paid her. He tipped her extra by a lot. And she looked at him strange. "You got any rooms to stay the night?" he asked. "One," she said. "It's kind of small, though." "I'll take it," he said. He started drinking whatever it was that she put in front of him. It was strong. He couldn't finish the glass, so he set it down and asked where the room was. "Third door on the left," she said. He got up and walked down the hallway. He got to the third door, opened it, and inside was the room from his memory. He was so confused, but he wasn't confused on the room. Nay, he had not even noticed it. He was confused on why Clara was here, in a pub and God knows where, serving drinks and renting out rooms. He decided he would stay a few nights and find out. When he laid down to rest, he closed his eyes and was in another one of his memories. It was night this time. There were gunshots and screaming. Where was he? He tried to open his eyes, but all he saw was black. He felt as if someone was running with him in their arms. He felt as if his guts were being poked at with a spiky, molten rod. He tried screaming, but the only noise to escape his throat was a soft groan. He could hear voices, muffled voices, as if there was a wall of syrup between him and them. He could only make out one voice, and it sounded female, and it was breathing heavy as it spoke. But we're almost there. We can't stop now. They'll get us. That doesn't matter. He's dead either way, said a gruff, deep voice. I can't believe that. If you want to go, go on ahead. I don't need you. I can get him across the field myself. With a shock, Al realized the thing that was impairing his vision fell away. He looked around to get his bearings. He was in the middle of a field, and it looked like someone had poured lava across the landscape. Everything was burnt, and there were gunshots coming from every direction. He saw who was talking. It was his wife, groaning as she pulled Al on a stretcher across the field. There was a man walking nearby, keeping a lookout. Come on, not much further now. This was a third voice, and it was a man that ran from the smoke to help Clara. With a jolt, Al realized he recognized this man. It was the stranger that had given him a ride to the town. Father, says Clara, what are you doing here? What about the castle? The castle has fallen, Clara Bear, Ed replies. The man looked down at Al and grabbed the cloth that had previously been covering his eyes. Stop, Ed said. Hold the pressure on the wound. And pain that was unbearable was unleashed upon Al's face. He awoke in a cold sweat in his own room in the pub. He was shaking and felt odd. This made no sense. Why did Clara and Ed not recognize him? Why did he keep having these memories of them, but they did not know him? He decided he would find out. He walked down the hallway to the pub he had been in earlier. Clara was standing behind the counter and looked at him when he walked in. Do you remember me? Al asked. Yeah, honey, she said. You were the bloke my father drove in from the woods last night. No, that's not what I meant, he replied. Do you remember anything else about me? Other than your weird nose, she said, looking him up and down. I've never seen you before in my life. He sat down. A sudden sorrow had cast upon him. He remembered so much about this woman. He knew everything about her, where she was born, her favorite color, and her favorite things to do. Yet she couldn't recall a thing about him? This was so confusing. He decided he was going crazy. Yeah, that must have been it. He decided he would also go take a nap. He needed it. He walked back to his room without a word to Clara and lay in his bed. Before he knew it, he was fast asleep. Do you remember how we met? It was his wife. He was laying in the same bed, just at a different time. My father found you wandering out on a road in the woods, and you weren't sure how or why you were there. He brought you to our pub, the castle. You stayed a few nights and told me all about your travels to distant lands. You told me how you fought in the war and how you were rich and famous. I grew to love you, and I knew that there was a man I could grow old with. On the third day after we met, you asked me to be your wife. How could I say no? You were handsome, intelligent, and rich. But I didn't care about the money, and I could tell you didn't either. You cared about me. When we went to the mountain near my father's pub, we built a mansion out of the money you had gotten from the war. We called the place our castle, named from the pub. You were nice to me. Then the Germans had started winning the war. People were saying they were going to attack here next. They sent a small cavalry to our village to take it out. You defended the village. You, along with 4 of the men and 1 boy. The Germans didn't like that. They lost 20 troops wiped out by the 6 of you guys. You sent a word to one of your buddies in British High Command and asked him to send reinforcements. That was a year ago. The battle has been fought at the foot of our hill for a year. They were using our mansion as the base of the British High Command here. Yesterday, the Germans were making their way up the hill, attacking the base when you were shot. 3 hours ago, I, along with one of the village men, carried you down the hill. My father joined us, and we got you through no man's land. Now, we're here in my father's pub, barely holding out.